I now call Glendon Goh of Hwa Chong Institution to advance his team's case and summarize for the proposition.
On our side of the house, we try to solve the problem of the liquidity crisis by implementing short-term business assistance measures. And on their side of the house, we see that their long-term industry development measures have completely failed to tackle the root cause of the problem today that we see, which is liquidity crisis. And as such, let's delve into my three main areas of clash that we see in today's debate. Firstly, let's compare the effectiveness of both policies in tackling the problem. Secondly, whether short-term business assistance measures are a moral hazard. And finally, whether short-term business assistance measures ensure job security. So now let's move on to my first main area of clash, which is comparing the effectiveness of policies. Now, on their side of the house, they propose long-term industry development. But the problem that the proposition sees with this, as my first speaker has said, this does not tackle the fundamental root cause of the problem, which is the liquidity crisis. Now, how can long-term industry development measures, thank you, madam, tackle the problem and solve and ensure that our economy is stable in today's world? Now, we see that this crisis is fundamentally different from those that we faced before. This crisis is a global crisis, which means that unlike the Asian economic crisis in 1997, Singapore cannot export its way to recovery. We cannot rely on countries like the United States, like Europe, to help us on our way to recovery. And as such, every government, including Singapore, needs to take concrete measures on its own in order to save the economy. Now, they also brought forth the idea of infrastructure development, and we tell you that is simply going to come too late. Now, building an MRT line is not easy. It will only come within a time frame of tens of years. And we say we cannot wait that long. We cannot let our economy suffer for tens of years before long-term industry development kicks in. They also put forth the idea of the creation of jobs.
What of information, sir?
Thank you, madam. Now, they propose the creation of 250,000 jobs. And we question whether this is possible. Let's consider once more that global demand is going to suffer. And since global demand is going to suffer, how is it possible they create 250,000 sustainable jobs, ladies and gentlemen, when nobody is going to buy the products and services that these jobs create? Now, having said that, let's examine outside the house. We propose a policy of short-term business assistance measures, including bank guarantees, including loans to companies, and finally, lowering of interest rates. And what this results in is a restoration of liquidity and capital in the market, and also a restoration of the stability of the economy, which is what investors like our team...
Point of information, sir.
Yes, madam.
What we are trying to say is, even though you may want to invest money in SMEs, however, why should we invest money in inefficient companies, even if they are...
Thank you, madam. Madam, on the point of why we should save companies that are struggling. Now we see, ladies and gentlemen, that many of these companies are struggling through no fault of their own. Can you blame your local factory for struggling when firstly there's no consumer confidence, no one wants to buy their goods, and secondly, no bank is willing to lend to them? Now can you blame your struggling factory for struggling? No, ladies and gentlemen, we say the situation is not as simple as that. Now having that, let's move on back to my case. Now we see that investor confidence is extremely vital because 56% of our GDP is derived from foreign direct investment. And by stabilizing the economy, by attracting these investors, we are ultimately helping our economy in the long run. So now let's
Point of information, sir.
No, thank you, madam. On the whole idea of morality, on the whole idea that short-term business assistance measures are moral hazard. Now they bring forth three arguments. Firstly, that it is the company's fault. And I've already dealt with this in my POI earlier, that really this crisis started in the financial sector, and because of this, only the financial sector is really responsible for the crisis. The other sectors, even though they are affected by the collapse of banks, by the decreased consumer confidence, you cannot really blame them for struggling now, and we have to help them in this period. They also brought forth the entire idea of the crutch mentality. And like my speaker has already put forth to you, the crutch mentality, ladies and gentlemen, does not exist simply because bailouts are always conditional. With the bailouts that we provide to companies are going to come with conditions to improve their regulation in future. And finally, they put forth the idea that this is going to be a black hole, that we're just simply going to dump money to them forever and ever and ever again and not get any returns. But I tell you that on the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, like in the example of the Singapore government investing in a Swiss bank in 2007, we see that now the taxpayers have reaped a profit of several percentage points. And ladies and gentlemen, this may actually be good for our taxpayers. Finally, on the final main issue of clash on job security. Now, their side has proposed long-term industry development through the creation of 250,000 jobs. And as I have earlier questioned the feasibility of of the creation of such jobs, we see that this point falls. Furthermore, let's examine whether short-term business assistance measures that directly help companies keep our jobs, ladies and gentlemen. We see that on our side of the house, clearly, we protect job security better than a long-term industry development which cannot work and does not directly help our job security. And as such, ladies and gentlemen, the choice is clear. Go with short-term business assistance measures. Go with the government.
And now, to round off the case for the opposition, I call Wen Ting from Dunman High School.
Prime Minister Lee was asked during his visit to Europe last December on any possible stimulus packages to be expected. He firmly replied that short-term measures are not meant for countries like Singapore due to its relatively small domestic market. Firstly, short-term measures such as business assistance schemes are not viable, as Singapore does not have the capacity to continuously introduce such measures to bail out companies. Bailouts create an over-reliance on the government and defies the true spirit of entrepreneurship. Google is a very good example of a company that has true entrepreneur spirit. It sailed through the dot-com bubble without any short-term assistance from the government. And today, it is not only profitable, it's the world's #1 leading search engine, and its market capitalization is worth a whopping $100 billion. Our government's prudent economic policies over the years have helped us survive tough economic times and gain investor confidence. However, if we continuously fund short-term measures, we will run into budget deficits, eat into our reserves, and eventually be forced to issue more bonds or print more money. And this will result in rampant inflation, depreciation of an individual's net worth, and worsen the economic situation. This will not solve any problems. As we move into the 21st century, the world is getting more competitive. In order to maintain Singapore's status as a developed nation, it is crucial that Singapore develops depth in certain core industries so that we can have a sustainable advantage.
Yes. Now, in times of a crisis, do we have to look at industrial development or help the businesses who need the survival?
I'm sorry, I don't get your point. And anyway, the people believe that our taxpayers' money, our good money, should be invested in long-term industry development for this generation and the next, which is exactly what our government has been doing. Long-term industry development will ensure that our nation can build its competitive advantage as well as create more jobs on a long-term basis. Let me give you the example of the tourism industry. Singapore has transformed into a tourist hotspot by making strategic investments ranging from the... Yes?
When the economy is fundamentally unstable, we see a comparative advantage will not come in until you solve the credit crisis.
Comparative advantage. Okay. Yeah. I'll go back to my point. Singapore has made strategic investments ranging from the integrated resorts to the F1 night race to the Youth Olympics. We even hosted the tattoo show just last week. The important point to note here is not just the 30,000 jobs that each IR can create, but also the many supporting industries that will blossom together with the growth in tourist arrivals, like the aerospace industry, the food and beverage industry, the security industries, etc. The opposition firmly believes that taxpayers' money should be used to fund schemes, such as the skills program for upgrading and resilience, to encourage and assist companies to retrain their workers. Such ongoing schemes are critical to help our people acquire new skills to meet industry demands, and thus will be beneficial for us as well as the economy in the long run. Also, developing industries such as the green energy industry will preserve Singapore's limited resources as well as reduce energy costs. Therefore, due to the reasons above, we, as the people of Singapore and R&D companies, fully support long-term industry development as opposed to short-term business assistance measures. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of, the debater's role in this debate, and now the spotlight falls to the three people who've been furiously taking notes in the fourth row. What will happen now is that the judges are going to leave the room to deliberate. Now,
We've come to a decision, but before the chairperson announces the winning team, I'd just like to say that we've been privileged to witness an impassioned debate. To start off, this is a pretty tricky topic and one that is difficult to understand and argue for. And I thought overall the teams had done their research well and tried to understand the issues and the concerns behind this topic and presented their points, fairly and brought them across pretty well. So a round of applause for them. Just some comments overall on the performance of the teams. We felt that some of the arguments while they were raised, were not fully fleshed out. They could have been brought up clearer and justified with a bit more structure. The comments were sometimes also, it's quite difficult to follow the train of thought where the issues were quite spanning across different areas, and we found it overall a little tricky to catch the train of thought that the argument that some of the speakers were making. But overall, I thought the persons doing the summary and roundup at the end laid out the arguments pretty well, and also managed to, for the winning team, managed to counter the opponent's points and laid out your team's position very well. Just one comment, another observation, is that the teams have been assigned roles to play. Some teams, for example, did not really argue the positions of their, of the role that they were supposed to play, and we felt that was a bit out of point and out of context. So that was something that should have been addressed. But overall, I think today, as a start, we had a pretty, interesting session, like I said.
Everyone, it is with great pleasure that I announce that the winner of this debate is the second team from the proposition, Hwa Chong Institution. And before you all leave, if you are leaving, I just wanted to say my own personal and on behalf of the team, congratulations to all these teams for a really magnificent effort at this very new style of debating. Thank you very much for your enthusiastic participation in our very first debate competition, and we hope that we will be able to be here next year and see you next year taking part again. Thank you.